said, I'm me, there's no one like me. Trying, deep down you trying.
What's up? It's Paris Hart and Jason Williams with another episode of the Love of It podcast. Today we have an enlightened individual, a voice of equality, a beam of hope in the chaotic world. We have somebody who is not only changing their region, but who's changing the world. We have Dom Roberts.
Woo!
Hey.
Clap it up. Oh my gosh, that was so beautiful. That was like the most beautiful intro I've ever received. Thank you.
We need to get more intros. We're gonna make sure that you get on some platforms where you're introduced better, because it's what you deserve.
Oh my goodness, thank you guys so much.
So to get it started, you're from Chandler, Arizona, a place that doesn't even have 5% African Americans. What was that like?
Well, no. Yeah, so I'm half Black, half Filipino, and my parents, we moved to the States. So I was born in Saudi Arabia, very random. That's where my parents met. There's like they're not like don't have any Middle Eastern background. It just, they happen to meet there. So when I first moved to Arizona, it was just a lot of culture shock because I was like first starting preschool, and I had like just started preschool in Saudi, and then we like moved as a family. So there's just a lot, very different dynamic. And then I think it's really interesting because growing up, I never realized the concept of race. At first, I think until first grade was like my first interaction where I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like the only Black kid. Like I genuinely didn't even know that I was Black. Like I know that sounds crazy, but I just, as a child, I didn't even understand like the concept of race or like I'm different until a friend, I don't know, I was supposed to go over to her house. This is like in first grade. And she said I couldn't because her parents didn't like Black people. Yeah, I know. Like just very straight up. And that was in first grade. And I came home and I was like, Dad, I'm Black. Like I was like, yeah. So thanks, Dad, for warning me. But yeah, so that was kind of like the first shock of reality I had, realizing like, oh, I'm different, and people notice and care. Like there's a social equity to race that I learned at a very young age, which is actually like really sad to think about, like a small little first grader having an experience like that. But yeah, so I was usually the only Black kid in my class, and I grew up just very like normal middle class, but yeah, just the only Black kid. Or if there was another Black kid, it was just, we were the Black kids, like the two other Black kids in the school. And people would call us, like we would look nothing alike. I think the first Black girl like finally came to my school, like in elementary school, in like fourth or fifth grade, and her name was Antonia, and people would just like switch our names, like, oh, Dom, Antonia. We looked genuinely nothing alike too, like at all. So I feel like that very much so carried into middle school, high school, and then also, wanting to fit in, because clearly you're going around people that look nothing like you, and you kind of have to assimilate to their culture just for the sake of like fitting in and like not getting bullied or anything. So that was very much so my experience. And I was never very like outspoken. If people said something, like I would never really correct them. I would just kind of let it slide because I was, outnumbered. And I feel like the times I would attempt to correct someone, they'd be like, oh, it's like not a big deal. Like it's not that deep. You guys get it, the classic. Yeah. So that was very much so growing up in Chandler. And it wasn't until I kind of like branched out after high school and got like different friends and realized, okay, like there's more to the world than just this that I'm experiencing.
Hey, I love your background, and I love hearing you say that, because I'm from a small Indian reservation, have no Indian in me, and my parents are Black and Puerto Rican. So growing up here, I really had a hard time, I would say, finding myself, because I had cousins in the city, and when they came over, we were Black. And then when I went to school, it's, oh, he's not one of those blacks. He's a different type. So growing up, I really had that trouble of trying to find myself, of being like, what is black? What is white? What am I? I don't know. If I try being nice and being polite, they label you as like, oh, you're white. And I realized myself kind of putting on a front for most of my younger years until high school, where I was just trying to be that thug and just trying to be tough. So no one would really test me. That was kind of my insecurities of, that's the worst thing that you could say to me, is don't call me white if I'm not white. Coming from that background, what was some challenges that you remember growing up in that type of environment where you were like, okay, I'm not going to say nothing because I have to just be the bigger, better person?
Yeah, I think so. What's really interesting, how old are you guys, out of curiosity?
22.
So I'm 24.
Okay, yeah. So we're the same age. I'm 24 as well. So I think this is, I'm going to high school around when like Vine was really popular and social media started to like take its place in the world. Like, I don't know, there wasn't necessarily like influencer culture yet. Like everything's just being established. There's still like Tumblrs around. And I think this is also like a lot of people were really into like trolling and like shock factor humor, like saying really intense, egregious statements for the sake of a shock reaction. And unfortunately, I think that a lot of people's humor was like rooted in like things like racism or thinking it's cool or funny to say the N word. And I experienced a lot of that. And there was definitely visible discomfort from me. But again, I would never like challenge or say like this is wrong. And if I did like voice my opinion and be like, hey, like I didn't appreciate when you said that, they'd be like, oh my gosh, you're being too sensitive. It's literally not that deep. Or, oh my gosh, it was clearly I do like Black people. Like you're my friend. And I'm like, yeah. And I don't know. And it's like, you're young and you're developing an opinion and you're trying to find yourself. Like those are such core times of how you build yourself and like build your character and everything and the person that you are. And so of course, also we didn't have as much access to information as we do now. Like I feel like information spread within seconds, and back then I feel like if you were interested in like educating yourself, you really had to put in the time and effort to learn. And so I would feel a certain way. I'd be like, okay, maybe I am being sensitive, or maybe I am just, yeah, maybe you're right. I guess it kind of was a long time ago. But what I was doing back then, a lot of the times, was just minimizing my experience and feelings instead of recognizing like these people are actually in the wrong. And it's okay for me to challenge people anytime now. I think like that's something as getting older and I don't know, becoming, yeah, just falling into who I am more as a person and like forming my own opinions and growing and learning about myself and getting older. I think that I definitely have come to the realization that I spent a lot of my younger childhood and young adulthood trying to like bend and appease people who didn't even try and learn anything about my culture or where my background or where I came from. And instead, it was either like assimilate and become like us or get bullied and we can make fun of you no matter what and kind of like live as an outcast. And I think it was really hard for me too, because the small group of Black people that did go to my high school we're very like grew up in all Black families, like we're surrounded in all Black communities, and I grew up with like mostly my Filipino side of the family, so I was just a melting pot of like different cultures. And so I agree with you. I think it was really hard for me to try and find my footing into these um different like spaces and trying to be like, okay, like where do I fit in, who do I fit in with. And I think what really helped with that, because I think that was a big challenge of my life of just feeling like I never fit in, like no matter where I go. And I think I just kind of came to a point where I was like, okay, I'm truly never going to fit in ever. Like I'm never going to feel fully like I quote unquote fit in. But there are people who make me feel comfortable, who do love me. And I think, fitting in, that idea of fitting in and having a group of people that like love and accept you, I think it also is an important reminder that that's what it feels like to be an individual. When you truly think for yourself and feel for yourself, like no one's ever fully going to understand you, because you're the one who like experiences your feelings and what you've grown up with. And I think people can relate or at least empathize with your experience, but it's something that I had to come to terms with. And I think that was like really helpful with like moving forward, because it can definitely be painful unpacking all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I definitely growing from that shy, reserved kind of. I'm just just getting into the road, trying to experience and navigate and find myself. To okay, I found myself. This is what I'm standing on. This is kind of like my pillar of personality, and going from that, and developing a whole platform and a brand from your podcast and just your internet presence. Can you just talk about just growing in that kind of space, growing in that kind of field where now your whole career is based on uncomfortable conversations and having those happy talks with people? Can you just speak to like that experience and that journey?
Yeah. Yes. 100%. Yeah. When when I first started posting on the internet, previously I had like no background in like graphic design, social media marketing. I learned all of that when I was in school and I needed an internship, and I was interning and for I was interning for this business that needed a social media intern, and I was like helping them. And I learned a lot of like marketing, graphic design there. And yeah, so that's really all the background and knowledge. Like the graphics I was making on my phone. And so in 2020, when the pandemic happened, and there were just a lot of conversations surrounding like Black Lives Matter, first with like Ahmaud Arbery, and then it's George Floyd, and then it's Breonna Taylor, and it just felt like it was one blow after the other. And what Ahmaud Arbery really like broke my heart. And I think that's what the first time I ever made a graphic was actually a tribute towards him, um, and his murder. And I created a graphic, just shared it on my story. I was like, hey, you guys, everyone's doing like a walk and jog to celebrate his birthday. And then I think maybe it was 2 weeks later or so, George Floyd was murdered, and that like gutted me. And against my will, I saw the video, and that's when I created my first graphic that was don't ignore something because it makes you uncomfortable. And it was really hard to watch that video, and I definitely didn't understand the importance of like boundaries or anything, especially as like a BIPOC person. I think that there's so much we're subjected to that we feel like, oh, like I can't turn a blind eye to it. And oh, like I have to see this. And I was taking on a lot of the weight of what happened because it felt so personal. And I'm sure you guys can relate how personal it felt, like as far as you're concerned. And I still feel like this. I felt like I know George and I've never met him ever a day in my life. But that graphic, don't ignore something because it made you uncomfortable, essentially like went viral overnight. And then I just started posting, more infographics, videos, what to say if you're talking to a government official, if you get through the line, what to say, and making calls, and essentially just helping people put action to their words. Because I think what I was seeing a lot of people do is a lot of inaction of just like, oh, prayers to the family. And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, great, thank you, prayers, positive vibes. But like right now, we're in a very crucial moment where we're actually going through a cultural phenomenon right now. And there's so much, especially since now we do have access to information. Social media, like literally overnight, like things can go viral and get the attention of so many people. Like the amount of celebrities reposting my graphics and like sharing awareness to their audience, like it was just insane. And I was seeing the power that social media and these infographics were having towards the movement, which like really inspired me to keep going and sharing and producing content that was like informational based or my own personal experiences. And I think through that time, I slowly started to unpack, wow, actually, I've been through a lot. And I genuinely didn't realize how much I minimized, how many of my personal experiences I minimized because of discomfort. Like when I was younger in high school and I didn't want to be the person always saying something or the overly sensitive person. And I realized that I lived a lot of my life in discomfort for the sake of others, which then it kind of became a personal brand, like the uncomfortable, like being uncomfortable, like not allowing things that make you uncomfortable stop you from speaking your truth, which is then how the podcast was born. Um, so I had a friend who had a show at Dear Media, and they kind of approached me to start a show, and they had nothing like it on the network. So I was really excited to kind of put that voice and face out in Dear Media. And I mean, the response was amazing. So many people were like, I need something like this. And I feel like the uncomfortable branched out from just talking about racism and different cultural experiences to also mental health and so many other different taboo, uncomfortable topics that people would shy away from.
Hey, that's what's up. And I just want to praise you for the work that you do, because I know me and Jason listening to your podcast and listening to the way you speak, it's like it makes us feel happy and it makes us feel at home knowing that there's someone speaking about it who's speaking educated, who's speaking well, and who's actually saying the way that we feel, but we just don't feel like we have an outlet to. Was when you first started speaking about it, was it like, was there any pushback, or was there anything that was like, oh, like, oh, I got to worry about the internet warriors this day or something like that?
Yes. So, a little where I differ from some of my friends on the internet is I did get a lot of pushback. A lot of the graphics I was making or episodes I was producing, a lot of, it would just get on the wrong side of the internet. And a lot of like conservative pages would like repost my stuff and be like, this girl's so stupid. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Willful ignorance and whatnot. So I would get like death threats. People would try and hack my account. Like I would get spammed like crazy links. Like they would just spam my account with like links. People would go on Reddit and be like, we're going to like spam block this account. So it would like suspend my account, and I would like try and use it. And it was like the craziest thing ever. But also it was like kind of fire that I have so many haters right now. Kind of into this. Yeah. So I think though it turned into a double-edged sword because so many people were listening in, so many people cared about what I had to say, and that's such an honor to so many people to believe in you for what you had to say. But then coming to terms with the fact that I have so much stuff that I actually haven't even dealt with yet, and it's all kind of coming to light because everyone's talking about it now. And it's not just the conversations we're having in line. It's like, I'm sure you guys can relate to this too, but it's the conversations we're having in person. It's the conversations you're having with someone maybe in high school who did something. And it's the conversations you're having with your racist uncle, and there are just so many conversations. And the more I kept going, I think I also realized how much labor intensive it was, and that this is definitely going to have an end date for me. And that I think that the conversations that I'm having and will continue to have, I don't think that the rate that I'm going at is sustainable, which was really hard to come to terms with, just because I kind of felt like I was like, I don't want to let anyone down. So many people are counting on me. Got to prove the haters wrong. But at the same time, as a human being with needs, and you can't just keep going forever. Like, you have to take care of yourself. Like, the world doesn't stop if you stop. You know what I'm saying? Like, the world will keep going. There's other people under me, younger than me, older than me, who have a voice too and a platform. Like, I'm not the only one doing this. And I think yeah, I think I really struggle with that in the heat of everything, of just putting a lot of pressure on myself to continue conversations, talking about things, pushing myself to like become uncomfortable. But I think it kind of definitely got to a point where I was like, okay, I need to find sustainability in this and find a way to continue this without completely like ruining my mental health and, you know, I guess losing myself in the process of saving others, which happens all the time.
Yeah, like the narrative is always constantly changing. Like, if one moment there's this kind of problem in the world, or like there's this thing going on, and like staying on top of it, and like just being the voice of not even just reason, but the voice of just like justice and the voice of equality. It comes with the fact that there's always inequality. So like, you're always a voice, like you're always speaking, and like always confronting willful ignorance. Like innocent ignorance, quote unquote, is something that is definitely draining. And it's also part of the reason why we don't hear about all the social injustice that's going on to this day. Like, we didn't really fix anything with the police. People are still getting unfair wages and stuff like that. And like you said, like that could just really like take on some like mental health. What's just something that you do that that you recuperate and like you rest, and how do you take a break from all that negativity that you fight against?
I think for me, I realized that, okay, I love this work, but I really need to implement strong boundaries. Just because when you put out work that's very like laborious, but also very life-giving, I think that because it's so personal to so many people's experiences, people can kind of rely on you as their source of information, their source of hope, and just their source for so many other things. And I realized I was kind of like giving too much of myself away. So I kind of had to implement like strong boundaries. Like, okay, if I post something and I realize that all these people from different conservative pages who don't even follow me are trying to like leave crazy comments and now they're like harassing people, um I'm like, I need to turn off my comments, or I need to like not respond to hate, or I need to learn like block pages. But also realizing that if something did happen and I wasn't in the emotional space to comment on it, that's okay too. And I think that was really hard for me, even with just being okay with having different kinds of conversations. Like, not every conversation has to be rooted in like racism or like terrible things happening to Black people, but also like the joys and the triumphs and just everything. And I think I kind of came to a place where I needed to find something outside of just making this my life. So, remembering like you can go outside and go on a walk, or you can like call a friend or go to the beach, or there's so many other things besides the internet. And I think at this time, because we're in the middle of a pandemic, everyone was very hyper fixated, and there wasn't a vaccine yet. So it's just really easy to make the internet your world. And I think now that's something that I'm very cautious of just not making the internet my world. That, if you want the voices to stop, like I can just turn off my phone. I can just delete the app. I can, you know, And I think that really helped a lot. And I also think that really helped like alleviate the pressure, but also having this self inventory of like, okay, having these conversations, like, where do you want this to land? Like, you know, that this is a trajectory that's not necessarily sustainable for you. And you know that it's eventually going to come to a landing page. What do you want that to look like? And I think having those conversations with myself, and kind of self-reflecting in that, you know, journaling and all those resources that I was using and those tools to help self-regulate when I was having like very high emotional days. Um, yeah, really helped me come to a healthier place in it, because I do think I definitely lost myself at some points in it.
Dang, well, how I just want to say I love your story and I relate with it so much. But like how do we get people to not just post a black square or not just put BLM in their matter or in their bio? How do we get them to do the next step, whether it's petitions, whether it's going to a mayor's house, whether it's doing something more than just saying I'm with you guys on social media? How do we get people to enforce that?
Yeah, I think the importance of this, because this is like a question I ask myself. I'm like, how do I get people like inspired, like want to be more involved? And the reality is you can't. At the end of the day, like, people are going to be their own person. But I will say that a lot more times than not, people are looking for a way to get involved, but just feel very overwhelmed. And I think the most important thing to realize is that you can't just live in the mindset of, well, I'm not them, like, or if I was there, you know, that's not enough. Or it's like, I would say something. Okay, great. Cheers. Very happy that you feel that way. Um, I think it's realizing that it's a lifestyle. And when something's a part of a lifestyle, you live it day in, day out, it just slowly becomes who you are. And I think like putting a lot of that preaching into practice. So whether that's, you know, reading a new book, or I think like it's so amazing that, you know, time is so valuable, and we have the resources because of the internet. Like, you can literally look up and see where you can volunteer and give back to communities that are right in your backyard. You don't have to go anywhere else. Right here in the US, there's so many people who need help. And you know, whether that's going to a soup kitchen, helping like fund someone's mutual aid, whatever the case is, there's so many different ways to get involved. And I think if you make the commitment, like, okay, this matters to me, I want to live a lifestyle that reflects this, you're just going to do it. And I think when it comes to people, like, okay, like, we want you to start like not just living this out in social media, but like living it out in the real world. I i think those conversations, like, say if you have a friend, right? I had a friend once who who really struggled with, like, online it was just one way, and then in person it was a complete other. And I'm like, Ma, you're living two lives. So I kind of just sat down and told her, like, hey, I think that you need to like start practicing what you preach, and like start making like what you say you want to do online a reality in person. And it wasn't a conversation of like, you're so fake, I can't even believe you, blah, 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 blah. But it was just a gentle one. It was very kind. It was very like understanding. And I think that approach is really important. And I think that a lot of people want to help, but are just really overwhelmed in which direction to go. So I think just allowing people to know there's so many ways to get involved. It definitely does just not reside on the internet. And I always challenge people, like, find out what's happening in your backyard that you can contribute to. Like there's amazing like so many black neighborhoods in Los Angeles that need support, especially right now during the pandemic, that are constantly reaching out for help, and nonprofits who need extra help. And it's not always about money too. Like your time, your skills are of value 24/7 too. So I think just realizing, okay, what do I like to do? What do I have time to do? And how can I implement it into my schedule? Also, but in a very guilt-free way. Because nothing bothers me more though is when people are doing the work, but they make that their whole personality. No one should applaud you for drinking water. It's just you have to do it. So it's like, I'm not going to applaud anyone for going to a protest. I'm not going to applaud anyone for helping and like using their time, because at the end of the day, if something matters to you, you'll do it whether anyone's looking or not. So I think I'm also very weary of that too. And I personally would recommend, if that's your approach of like, oh my gosh, like I'm a better person now, or I'm better than them because I went to a protest. I'm like, actually, I wish you didn't go to a protest, because that energy is really not it. Like, we don't need more of that entitlement and self-righteousness towards the movement either. And I guess that's mostly speaking towards white allies, which I think sometimes that performative or like self-centered gloating of like, that I got pepper sprayed by the police. It's like, okay, cool. People die. Black people will be getting gunned down every day. Like, thank you for experiencing something.
Yeah, like there's definitely a lost sense of like genuineness or like genuinity when it comes to like things that are popular on the internet at a time, because without all the internet influencers giving out highlights and showing what's going on, people didn't really care too much about it. And it's just like when people like co-opt the movement, it's just like, okay, now it becomes something more, and then now you're fighting against the people you're marching with, because now it's just like we're not on the same page really. And it's just all this, when you're trying to do the right thing, there are also others who want to do the right thing but not for the right reason. So I can
Exactly.
understand how just like trying to filter through all that and trying to be genuine is just something that I personally find pretty draining. It's one of the main reasons why I don't even like to participate a lot on the internet with like conversations and stuff like that. Like I'm probably an example of somebody who's super burnt out but who wants to keep putting in like the work. So I just make the small conversations with my family, my friends, when I can. So you know
Yeah. And I definitely think I reached that point as well of just feeling super like burnt out. And I think that's the point where like us, just a part of the BIPOC community who have like been heavily affected by everything that's happened in, I mean, since birth, but also especially in these last couple of years. I think that's where, really trying to reiterate to our white allies who do have privilege, who do have the privilege of just tuning it out, who, you know what I'm saying? And kind of being like, hey, like a lot of this is where like you guys can step in. Like the work is really draining. Like it is really hard to explain why you shouldn't say the N word in a song. I don't know, whatever the case is. And I think that it's just kind of important to like reiterate to everyone who considers themselves an ally to any movement is that we're all doing this together. It doesn't just rely on one group of people, but that we need everyone's attention. And sometimes it doesn't look like I'm just going to repost something on my story, but I definitely totally know what that feels like when you're just like, I can't talk about this anymore. Like, let's talk about Clifford. Honestly, just
yeah,
anything at this point.
yeah. Like with that being said, we went from a whole chapter of podcasting and putting out awareness. What's the next moves that you see for yourself?
I definitely think that I have the approach of just an overall being on the internet, not just an activist, not just an influencer, but really everything. I also think that it's cool that I get to live as an example on the internet of someone who can be all things. Just because I don't know, I didn't see a lot of people like me growing that looked like me or had the same approach as me on the internet. So kind of pioneering that is really special. And yeah, I think, more fun projects, different things that I want to work on, definitely releasing more clothing. And yeah, I think I definitely do want to do more in-person like outreach, like hands-on rather than so much on the internet, which is like something that I want to work on with producing this year in 2022, which I'm very excited about. But yeah, keeping things kind of same old, same old.
Dang, that's what's up. And thank you for just being you, being the best Dom you could be. And just bringing the message of positivity and equality is huge. I know that when I went to the protest in Buffalo, there was a couple people that made me feel uncomfortable being in that environment where they were talking about, oh, I hope my boss fires me because I'm going to get paid, or I hope I make the news, or I hope this or that. And I know at that point I was like, wow, like it's so sad that we can't get together for something that's really just to uplift people, but there's still people here that just really want the selfish Instagram views from being live or the Facebook views from being live at the event. And I know that really pushed me over the top. But for you, I don't know how you've done so much great things and you're doing keep it going. So I just want to give you your flowers and I can't wait to see what you got coming out. Not only next year, but the next couple years.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
Oh,
definitely thank you for coming out to the episode. Thank you for sharing so much of your story and really putting yourself out there. We appreciate you for that.
No, I appreciate you guys. This is an awesome podcast, and I'm so honored to be a part of it.
hey, where can our listeners go and find you on social media?
Yeah, you guys can follow me on Instagram. That's my main platform, and it's just Dom Roberts instead of an E, it's an X. And for any upcoming projects that I'm working on, it all resides on my other Instagram page, which is the uncomfortable org on Instagram.
Hey, there you have it, everybody. That's Dom Roberts. And if you want to see some great content and if you want to be an effective beam of hope, you got to see the people that are doing it. And Dom's one of them.
Hey, this is Dom Roberts, and you are listening to the Love of It podcast.